Hello there everybody and welcome back to another video. So, today we got our piece of paper out here again, and basically I'm going to be explaining today the difference between decimals and fractions. So, if that's something that you have ever wondered about, or if you're currently wondering about, or whatever, then hopefully you can learn something from this video. So, basically, yes. So first we should start with, what is a fraction? Just so that we are all on the same page. Although, we have two papers here and we're only using this one, so I guess we're both on the same page, or all on the same page. But anyways, so, fractions, as I explained in a different video, actually, is basically, let's say that's a pie. And let's say you were to divide it in half, and that's a little bit of a squiggly half, but anyways, so you divide your pie in half, then you have 2 halves of a pie. Or you can divide it in quarters, and then you have 4 halves. No, you don't. You have 4 quarters of a pie, and you divide it in... Actually, what is that? Anyways, that's like 2 quarters and 4 eighths and whatever. For the sake of simplicity, let's do that. There we go. So now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 eighths of a pie. And if you were to, let's say, take away all of them except for 2 of them, then you're left with 2 eighths of a pie. So that would be written like 2 over 8. So that's what a fraction is. And basically what a decimal is like this. Like 0 point, or it could even be whatever point, but it's after the point that matters to us. So let's say 0.124890654321. Something like that. So, that is a decimal. And what's the difference, the question comes, between a decimal and a fraction? And I'm moving this paper around. Anyways, let's stay there. Okay. So the difference between a decimal and a fraction is basically a decimal is a fraction. So, basically what that means, a decimal is a fraction because you get here, let's say we were to take this pie, let's take a different pie, because that one already has lines in it. So let's take one that doesn't have lines in it, and let's say we were to divide this pie into 10 pieces. That would be, do something like that, and like that, and like that. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. So now we have a pie divided into 10 pieces. So you could write, like, let's say you were to take, let's say 3 out of those 10 pieces. So let's say you only had 3 out of 10 pieces. Then what you would do is, for a fraction, that would be out of 10 pieces. I almost wrote 12 there. That's not supposed to happen. Out of 10 pieces, you have 3 of them. Or you could write that as a decimal, because that first digit of the decimal means, like, so let's back up a little bit and let's leave that paper there. That paper keeps moving around. Okay, so this 0 here, that's how many whole, let's say, pies you have. That's how many whole pies. And then after the decimal, that's how many fractions of a pie. The first place is tenths. The first place is tenths. So if you were to divide the pie into 10 pieces, and you have 3 out of 10, you have 0 whole pies, decimal, or you can say point, 0 whole pies, 0.3 tenths of a pie, because that place is tenths. So let's say let's say you also, instead of just having the 3/10 of a pi, let's say you were to take one piece over here and divide it into 10 again. Then let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just imagine that these lines go the whole way, because it's going to get really crowded if I try to fill them in all the way. And do the other side. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's sort of tense. It's a little bit squished and whatever. But anyway, so let's say you had these 3/10, and then you took 1/10. I'm actually going to fill in some of these lines. So you took another 10th and divided it again into 10 pieces, and then you wound up with, let's say you took 3 out of those 10. So that's about like that. So 3 out of 10 over here. So you got 3 out of a tenth of the whole pi. You got 3 out of a tenth of one piece of the pi, the piece being a tenth. So that's a tenth of a tenth. So that means it's 100th. And so then you got 3/100ths of a pi. Maybe it could be better explained this way. So I'm going to actually turn the paper sideways and just make sure that that can still be seen in the whole camera, or that the whole paper can be seen in the camera. And I'm going to draw a line. So here is a line over this way. And let's say, let's make this 0. And let's make this, let's say 1, actually. And make the line point to it so that we can actually see. Oh, mistake. Make that -1. So this is 0, this is 1, and this is -1. And if you want to learn more about negative numbers and all that, I have another video explaining that. So there will be a link on the screen, assuming I remember to put it there. There will be a link on the screen to that video explaining about negative numbers and that. But anyways, so we've got 0, and we've got -1, and we've got 1. So we have this line here. We have 0, we have 1. Let's divide it into tenths. So that would be divide it in half, and then divide the halves into fifths. So that's like something like that. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then let's do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we've got this divided into tenths. And someplace you might have seen this before is on a ruler. Especially if you're using the metric system is very much based on tenths, multiples of 10 and whatever. So yeah, if you're using the metric system, you would definitely have seen this before if you use rulers. And so yeah. So anyways, let's say this is a centimeter, okay? It's not at all a centimeter. Let's say this whole thing is a centimeter. We just blew it up to make it easier to see. So that's 1 centimeter. And then we divide that centimeter into tenths. So now we got millimeters. Let's say we are trying to measure something. Something like something. I don't know. But anyways, let's say we have something that is only 3/10 of a centimeter. If this were actually a centimeter, because a centimeter is actually more like this distance. But anyways, blowing it up so that that's a centimeter, we have 3/10 of a centimeter is something. Except that thing is not actually 3/10 of a centimeter. Let's say that thing is a little bit more than 3/10 of a centimeter. So what we do if we're working in decimals, so let's write this down. So we got 0 full centimeters, point, let's say 3, 0.3, so 3/10 of a centimeter. And let's say we were to take this one and divide it again, and where I'm going with this, I'm going to tie this in with the fractions after. So I'm just explaining this right now. So let's divide this into tenths. So something like that. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think I did that right. Okay. So let's say our thing that we're measuring is not actually 3/10 of a centimeter. Let's say it's a little bit more. So let's say it's 3/10 of a centimeter, and then this is 1/10 of a tenth. So that's let's say 4/100ths. So now we have our thing is 3/10 and 4/100ths of a centimeter. And that's where we get our decimal from. That's the tenths, that's the hundredths. And we could keep going, and we got the thousandths, the 10,000ths, the 100,000ths, and like that. So basically, that is a decimal, and this is a fraction. And so that's basically it. So then the question comes, what is the difference? Which I think I already explained that sort of. It's basically, it is a fraction. Like, let's say this thing, you could also write this, and if you didn't want to use a decimal, you could write it as a fraction. You could write 3/10 and 4/100ths. So there's two different ways you could do that. You could say you have 3 out of 10 pieces plus 4 out of 100 pieces. That's one way you could do it. Or you could even take that and you could write 34/100ths. And basically what that is if you were to take this whole thing and divide it like we did over there, divide this whole thing into hundredths, then you'd have 10/100ths here, 10/100ths there, 10/100ths there, and 4. So that's 34/100ths. So basically decimals are fractions. So there's another question that you could be asking, and that question comes in the form of, what happens when you try to take some random fraction and try to turn it into a decimal? So decimals, hopefully I explained this pretty well, and if there's anything that you don't understand, or if I'm missing things, or if I'm like, I don't know, whatever, something that doesn't make sense, then leave a comment and I will see what I can do about answering and trying to help explain this better. But anyways, so turning from decimals into fractions are actually very easy because a decimal is a fraction. Although a fraction is not necessarily a decimal quite easily. So let's see how I can explain this. So basically, let's turn it back over here. There we go. That is more what I'm looking for. When you have the proper tools, it gets a lot easier to draw a circle. So here, this may look like a lot of lines, or it may not, but I'm going to just break this down for you just so that you understand what's going on here. So, this is a circle. That's the obvious part. These darker lines, can you actually see that they're darker? Yeah, it looks like it. Alright, so these darker lines are the thirds. So you take this big circle and you divide it into 3 pieces. And then these lighter lines are the tenths. So, and not the tenths. We're not going camping right now. This is the tenths, not the tenths. Even though they sound very similar. Anyways, so, back to our example before. So let's say you had 2/3. So let's say 1/3 and let's say 2/3. And just fill it in just a little bit more. So I'm just filling it in around the outside just so that you can see better. So let's say you had these 2/3 of a pie over there. So how many tenths is that? Well, that is 1, 2, 3, 4. I missed the one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and not 7, and not 6. So So basically the point here is that although decimals are fractions, fractions are not always easily decimals. So basically, yeah, so see, we got 2/3 of a pi here, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and not 7 and not 6 tenths. So the tenths would be, not the tenths, we're not going camping, the tenths would be, we have 0 whole pies, point, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths of a pi. And then we have here not another whole tenth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and divide that into tenths. There we go. So now this is divided into tenths. So that would be, as I explained before, that would be your tenths over here. So tenths, hundredths, basically your tenths of your tenths. Anyways, that's a complicated, like, sentence that I just said. Anyways, so 2/3, so you have, over here, we already established we have 0 whole pies, we have 6 tenths of a pi, and not 7 tenths of a pi. We have, now, we divided that part, so now, if we kept those little lines going all the way around, that would be 100 of them. So, or at least 100 sections between them. So that would mean that's 100th of the whole pie. And how many hundredths of a whole pie? How many extra hundredths? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and not 7 again. So we have 6 tenths of a pie, we have 6 hundredths of a pie, plus a little bit and everything. And basically the point of what I'm saying is that fractions don't always work into decimals very well. Decimals are fractions, but fractions are not always decimals. So that's basically what I'm illustrating here. And in fact, this example, so this, as you can tell, this is even thirds. These are thirds of a pie. 1/3 or 2/3, 2/3. That's really simple. That's obviously a fraction. And yet when you try to make it a decimal, it's not obviously a decimal. And in fact, this example keeps going. You could keep dividing each section into another 10 pieces and whatever if your pen would go that small. And it would keep going 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, like millionths, 6 billionths, 6, like whatever. And it just keeps going. This is what you call a repeating decimal, because it just keeps repeating, because it never quite fits when you divide into decimals, when you divide into tenths or tenths of a tenth or tenths of a tenth of a tenth. Or would that be tenths of a tenth of a tenth, or would that be tenths of a tenth of a tenth? I don't know. Anyways, so yeah. So it never quite works, this one. There's another one that does actually work, sort of. It's, so let's say instead of thirds, let's say I divided this into eighths. So I'll be right back as soon as I get it divided into eighths. So here we have some eighths. Eighths. That is a hard word to say. Anyways, so here we have some eighths, and so there's a lot of lines here. So I'm just going to explain this just so that you sort of can see what's going on a little better. So the eighths lines I highlighted in red so that you can see them easier. And actually, does that show up on the camera? Yes, that does show up on the camera. All right. So yeah, so the eighths lines are highlighted in red, and these squiggled out lines are the thirds because we're not interested in those anymore, but I can't erase pen. So those used to be the thirds. Now, well, they still are thirds, but we're not interested in those. And then there's our regular lines for tenths and tenths of tenths, which would be hundredths, and all that. So, what I was trying to say is that eighths actually do work out into decimals. So, basically, let's say, obviously, if you had 4/8, that is a half, and that's also, as we said earlier, that's also 5/10, which means that it's 0.5. That's the obvious one. And then also if you get, and by the way, I'm explaining all this in pictures. You can do all this with math, like regular numbers and stuff, but I'm explaining the pictures right now. So the eighths, let's say you were to take, let's say 5/8. So we get here 5/8, so that's 1/8, 2/8, eighths, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. So we get, let's get rid of this. It's kind of hard to scribble out a squiggle. That's something. That's a thing. Anyways, it's hard to scribble out a squiggle, so I'm just gonna sort of X it off. So we get this whole squiggle up to this eighths line here, and I got something underneath my paper apparently. I'm gonna get rid of that. So there we go. So what we got here, you can see we got, if we look at our tenths, what we have for these 5/8, we have 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, and a bit more. So we have 0 whole pies. We have 6/10 of a pie. We have a bit more than that. So a tenth of a tenth, which is a hundredth. We have 2 whole hundredths of a pie. And then we have more than that. We have, that is really hard to see, but if we were to divide that into tenths again, then that would be 5. So if we were to divide this little thing into tenths again, we would have 5 of those tenths, and then that's it. So 5/8, let's write that down. 5/8 is exactly equal to 0.625 tenths. Or not tenths, but 0.625. 6/10, 2 hundredths, and 5 thousandths. And again, that decimal could be translated back into a fraction easily with 625 thousandths. There we go. So, hopefully this makes some sense. I feel like my explanation really didn't make all that much sense somehow. I'm not really sure why. But hopefully this makes some sense. And I might do another video. We'll have to see how things work out. But I might do another video explaining this from the perspective not of pictures, but of the math and stuff. So you can see like when you work out the numbers and symbols and whatever, what you can do with those, in case you are wondering about that. So anyways, yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully this was somewhat understandable, and if there's anything that was unclear or ununderstandable, sounds like I'm repeating myself. If there's anything that was ununderstandable or unclear or whatever, just leave a comment and I will see what I can do. Of course, I can't promise everything. I can't promise everything. No, I can't promise anything is what I mean. But yeah, I've tried that before, where I try like, I'm gonna do this, and then I don't do it. So yeah, so I'm saying I will see what I can do. But anyways, you can leave a comment and I'll see what I can do about helping you out if this was not understandable somehow or whatever, or if this was confusing or whatever. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and this is Handy Andy signing off, and bye-bye!